Commission meeting of July 6, 2023 to order. It is presently 6:20 p.m. Right, Bill, can you call the roll? Sure.
Commissioner Stenik? Yes. Scarpelli is absent. Commissioner Brunner?
Here.
Reyes Braher is absent. Commissioner Myers?
Here.
Commissioner Feck?
Here.
And Commissioner Kruger?
Here.
Fantastic. With the quorum met, we'll move on to our next order of business, which will be the approval of minutes from the June 1st, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as included in our packet?
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion we'd like to have? Anyone have any amendments they'd like to make? Okay.
Stenik?
Yes.
Brunner?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Feck?
Yes.
Kruger?
Yes.
Okay, passes. So on to the next order of business. Do we have anyone in the audience looking to make a public comment on our agenda items of the day? Nope. With no one looking for a public comment, we'll move on to new business. And this will be a public hearing in regards to the planned use development for the Pal Land LLC and Pal Land 2 LLC located in the M1 and or M2 and or R1 and or B3 zoning districts. Could I have a motion to open up the public hearing for this as noted in the agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion in a second.
Stenik?
Yes.
Brunner?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Feck?
Yes.
Kruger?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes. So the public session is open. This being our first PUD hearing that we've had, I think, in a while. It'll be a slightly different, a little more formalized agenda that we're going to walk through tonight. We're going to start with the applicant providing a proposal, their case, and providing any witnesses and exhibits, and then we'll provide an opportunity for a rebuttal in the back and forth if there are any objections. So with that, could I ask the applicant, the representative from the applicant, to come up and be sworn in?
Okay, can you raise your right hand, please? Whoever wants to speak. Whoever is going to speak.
Raise your hand.
Should say their name first.
Yeah, can you please state your name?
Attorney Peter Bezos.
Jeff Newing, Joe Palumbo.
Do you swear to tell the truth, and the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Fantastic.
I'll let the record reflect that the applicant and his witnesses have been sworn.
You may continue. Yes.
So, commissioners, good evening. I've been before you, some of you before, and not others. My name's Peter Bezos. I'm an attorney in Elgin. I represent the petitioners, which are Pal Land and LLC and Pal Land 2 LLC, which are the progeny of Joe Palumbo, here sitting in the brown shirt to my left, your right. Here with me this evening are not only Mr. Palumbo, but his operations manager, Jeff Newing, and his son, Joey Palumbo, who works in the business with his dad. We're here this evening to seek a PUD for the 33 acres of land that begins at the south boundary of Route 68 and comes directly south. We'll show you where that is in a moment. We're requesting a rezoning. Most of that land is already M1, but some of it along the very west side is R1, I believe. We're requesting that all of it be rezoned to M1 with the PUD overlay. So we're requesting that, and we're requesting preliminary plat and preliminary PUD approval for the entire 33 acres. If you'll allow us to, I'll go through our remarks and our responses to the staff report, and then I believe Jeff Newing would like to speak, and then we'll sit down and take questions. We think it's very important for the Plan Commission to understand the history of this site. I understand that Franco printed out our slides. So the top slide is the land as it appeared in 2007 when I first was retained by Mr. Palumbo to retain him. essentially that outlined area. He didn't own all of it at that time. Basically, he owned about 150 acres, and in 2007, the village board, under its ordinance 0751, later amended by 0874, approved a PUD for the Terra Business Park. Now, the next slide is 16 years later. We stand before you in 2023, and this is what it looks like now. The bottom part with all the yellow labels, the south part with the yellow labels, is the original PUD. North of that is, I'll get to in just a moment, but the PUD, along with the TIF incentives that the village gave to Mr. Palumbo, resulted in what we believe, and what I hope there's no disagreement on, is a very successful business park here in East Dundee. There's a new retail building going up right now within the park. Speedway, Enterprise, you can see all the development that's occurring there. So now Mr. Palumbo, since 2007, when he started this, has acquired additional acreage. So now what you see outlined in red essentially amounts to approximately 400 acres of land. What we're here for tonight is for what we call Phase 2 of the Terra Business Park. And Phase 2 is the yellow box at the very northeast corner of the picture. As you can see, well, and is it better? On the next page, frankly, you can see this is called a preliminary PUD plan. This is the entire 33 acres. And as you can see, we're proposing to subdivide it into 5 lots. Is that right? Yep. Let me catch up where I was. Lot 5 is going to be donated to the village. We understand you have a user down here, and a heavy industrial user that you'd like to move out somewhere. And I think that's where you're planning to put them. But as soon as we can get this lot created, we're going to donate that land to the village. Lot 1, which has got the parking spaces outlined, is the site for the very first building that Joe is planning to build, a 47,000 square foot industrial building. And the other lots will be developed as the market demands. Because some of these lots are on along Route 68, Dundee Road, but nevertheless, just as Phase 1 was approved, we're asking for the permitted uses to include not only the M1 uses, permitted uses, but also the B uses, and the conditional uses to be the same, and the manufacturing and the business conditional uses. This is going to allow flexibility if, for example, we get a retailer that wants to come along Route 68, or Joe finds a user and he'll build a building and put them in there. I think it's important to note that if this PUD is approved and ultimately the final plat is approved, Joe is committing to build an extension, a disconnected extension of Rock Road from Route 68 on the north, going down to the very south end of this 33 acres. The intention, if you want to flip back perhaps to the second page, the intention is that Rock Road, you can see it up there in the north in that yellow box, but the intention is that eventually Rock Road would go straight down south and connect to Route 72. So you'd have a direct connection between Route 72 and Route 68. That will happen in increments. It's possible, who knows what will happen in the future. Maybe the village will figure out some way that we can accelerate that with some TIF funding. But in any event, this is the beginning of that new roadway that I think is in your thoroughfare plan. This cannot immediately go to final plat because IDOT has a say-so on road alignments. And Joe Hines has been intimately involved, along with our engineer, with IDOT. I don't know, Joe can tell you when he speaks whether there's any update, but as far as we know, they're plodding along as IDOT always does. But I think we're all hopeful that they're going to approve this layout, which would then result in Penny Road getting a bit straightened out in an east-west direction, eliminating the Penny Road connection up to Route 68. The village, part of our deal is that the village would vacate that, and Penny Road would be much more in an east-west direction without that horrible obtuse connection. Our petition, essentially, because it's a PUD, it asks for essentially the same departures as were approved by the village board as to the original 2007 PUD. You know, when you're not doing a PUD, you call them variances, but when you're doing a PUD, they're often called departures. And the PUD ordinance you have is like everyone else's. It basically says that a municipality can approve departures from its strict compliance with its zoning ordinance if it feels that it would result in a better and more creative land plan. And we think, just as occurred in phase one, we think that that's proof in the pudding that you're going to see the same thing here. The village staff issued a report which, while supportive of many of our requests, advances certain staff recommendations that shows that they're not exactly in agreement with the departures we're requesting. And I'd like to go through them with you. If you could refer to the table that staff gave you as page 3 of Franco's report. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. There are actually 5 more items that weren't picked up, and I'll go over those as well. But so let me refer to these by the. This is a copy of what you're looking at, right? I made it bigger, but down the left-hand side, there's the row number. So I want to tell you that the petitioner and staff are in agreement as to items 1 through 4, and we're in agreement with 22, 24, 26, 28, and 35. So that's 1 through 4, 22, 24, 26, 28, and 35. We're in agreement with staff. As to item 6, which is building height, we're also in agreement with that. Staff worded it a little bit differently than we did, but we are nevertheless in agreement that the maximum building height would be 35 feet. But a parapet wall, if we're supposed to do screening, could be up to 6 feet taller than the rooftop to screen them. So we're in agreement with 6 as well. As to number 5, the building setback in the rear yard, the phase 1 ordinance is allowed 20 feet. Staff is requesting 40 feet. The petitioner asks that the village stay with the previously approved setback. The more we have to set back, the less buildings we can build, the smaller the parking lots can be. So, as I'll say more fully at the end of my remarks, it was approved in 2007. The phase 1 is a big success. We've never heard any complaints about the way the park looks, and we hope you'll simply view this as what it is. It's the second phase of a park that we started 16 years ago. As to 8 through 12 parking lot setbacks, again, the petitioner is requesting what was approved for phase 1, but staff is requesting increases to those parking lot setbacks. So we're not talking building setbacks, but the distance between the edge of a parking lot and the street. We're asking that the that these parking lot setbacks be ratified as they were in 2007. The square footage that we would lose just along this first phase of this phase, pardon me, just along Rock Road in this phase 2 would be 30 feet times the lineal distance of 2,400 feet. Is that right? 2,400 feet? We'd lose
30 and 60.
Yeah, okay. We'd lose how many acres?
60 feet, 3.3 acres.
3.3 acres
Right.
of building area, because the parking lots would have to be pushed back farther, which would shrink the buildings further. So we don't think, not only was that not consistent with phase 1, but we think it actually would result in smaller square footage out there, which would be lower real estate taxes for you. As to number 15, the signage, The petitioner is asking that the signage allowed be both the signage that is allowed in business, in a B business classification and an I industrial classification. I wasn't clear on what the staff comment was there. I know I spoke to Franco about it, but we are asking that you allow us to do signage that is appropriate for either the I or the B districts.
B or the M.
Hmm?
B or the M.
Oh, sorry, M, B or M, pardon me, you're right, B or M. As to item 20, let me turn my page here. This is open space required. Back in 2007, the village board approved a decrease from 15% to 5%. We were asking for 5% again here, just to match what was done before. And staff is recommending 10%, which, again, you know what I'm about to say, but we'd like to keep what was done before. As to number 25, regarding the number of car parking spaces between islands, in phase 1 in 2007, the village board approved 1 island for every 40 spots of cars. So after you got to 40 cars in a row, you had to put a landscaped island on each end. For phase 2, we proposed to shrink that and have more islands, but we said we'll do an island every 22 spaces, and the staff is asking that we do an island for every 18 spaces. If you will look, Jeff, do we have those? Yeah. Oh, okay. Pardon me. Look in your packet on the back, you're going to see drawings like this. This shows our buildings at 250 Patricia and 200 Christina. And it shows you how our parking is laid out there. There are no islands where the trucks are parked, and that was the case in phase 1. We're also asking that that be the case here. But where there are car parking only, and you'll see, for example, on this one on the east end, there's car parking here, and there's an island around the car parking. And that's what we're asking, again, that the islands for car parking be required only every 22 spaces, not 18. Truck islands, again, I think I said that a minute ago, but there are no truck islands required. They frankly are just unworkable. You just can't have trucking facilities that have to work around landscaped islands. I'm not aware of any industrial parks that require that where semis park. It wasn't required in phase 1, and we're asking that it not be required here. I can see that the right-hand column of this chart doesn't have anything in it, so I'm assuming that staff's in agreement, but if I'm wrong about that, they can speak to that. Okay, as to number 29, the village board eliminated the need for building foundation plantings in this park. Staff is asking for foundation plantings along the front foundation. You know, oftentimes there's a sidewalk in front of a building and there's a 5 feet gap between the sidewalk and the building. That was waived in 2007. We'd like to do the same here. If you've all driven out to the park, we hope you don't feel as though there's any aesthetic problems with the way that phase 1 looks. As to number 30, the village board approved that any outdoor trash enclosures could be screened with landscaping. The staff is asking, though, that your ordinance be enforced with masonry enclosures. Again, we don't agree with that. As a practical matter, Joe Palumbo's tenants, Joe owns all these buildings out here except for Speedway and Enterprise, but none of his tenants, am I right, has an outdoor trash enclosure. They keep them all inside in dumpsters and roll them out. But if there ever were a trash enclosure to be built, we'd like the right to be able to screen it with tall arborvitae or some other landscaping as the village board approved in 07. As to number 34, The village board eliminated the requirement for sidewalks in Phase 1, so there are no sidewalks along Christina Drive or any other side streets. It's just a busy industrial park. The staff is asking that we put sidewalks along one side of all the streets in this Phase 2. We just don't see a need for it, but as a compromise, we don't want to sound like a broken record, as a compromise, Mr. Palumbo is willing to put a sidewalk down one side of Rock Road from Route 68 down to Penny Road. We don't know, frankly, who'll use it, but if that's what, if the staff feels, or if the board feels that a sidewalk is needed, we'd be happy to put it there. These are some matters that I didn't see called out in the staff's report, and I would like to, in fact, I'd like to hand them out to you. I have labeled these 36 through 40, which just continues the numbering sequence. So one of the things we ask for in our petition is that utilities be allowed to be installed above ground. Obviously, that doesn't apply to gas, but electricity doesn't apply to water or sewer either, but electric lines, cable. Now, that was approved in Phase 1, and so we're hoping you'll approve it here. Joe, is that true that do we have above ground? We don't have any overground.
We do behind the number 1 building.
So we had overhead lines behind a building.
Right.
And you may need to do that again?
No.
You won't, so we're okay with everything underground? Okay, take it all back. We retract the requested departure for above-ground utilities. I didn't see that the memo I didn't see the call out in the memo that we're asking for use departures, because we're asking for an M1 PUD, but as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, we'd also like the permitted uses that are allowed in B2, B3, B4, as well as the conditional uses that are in B2, B3, B4. Conditional uses obviously would have to come back before you and the village board to get approved. The departure, number 38 in my list, is the departure as to the number of off-street parking stalls, which pertains to your ordinance 157.150 Roman V, Roman 5. So right now your ordinance says you have to have one car parking stall for every 2 employees, as I recall. But it's based on employees. Well, Joe has built all these buildings on a spec basis, so we don't often know how many employees they're going to have. So what we are asking for is that the PUD ordinance permit one parking stall, or require one parking stall for each 250 square feet of office space. And by the way, that is consistent with what your ordinance says. But then it require one automobile parking stall for each 6,000 square feet of warehouse or shop space, which is what we're showing here. But on the condition that if the occupant, when we get a tenant, if that occupant has more employees than this formula would have provided for, then the village could require us to convert some of the truck parking stalls to car parking stalls if the village feels that there's a parking problem. Again, we just don't know what our tenants are going to have. So this seems to me to be a formulaic approach to with giving the village final oversight on what's happening. As number 39, as to loading docks, and I'm not sure, Joe and I talked about it, Joe Hines and I talked about it, but I don't know if this is a departure or not. I thought it was. So if a building has to have a loading space, that space could be provided either by a loading dock door and or a designated truck parking stall in the parking lot that would be striped out and designated loading. And that essentially is what we're asking for. That number 40 is, you have a site plan, or you have this PUD plan. All these departures are, identified by the petitioner, and then the staff sees others. I have long since learned that even multiple sets of eyes can sometimes miss something, and I always think it's good practice to have an ordinance provide that if you approve this plan and there's something that someone says later, oh my gosh, you didn't enumerate that something was so many feet this way and that if that departure is apparent on the plan but is not called out in writing, that it be deemed approved. So that was a mouthful. Let me ask Jeff Ewing to step up, and then we'll be done, and we'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you guys for having us in today and being able to present this in this forum.
Can you just restate your name for the record?
Yes, this is I'm Jeff Newing. I work with Palumbo Management, Joe and family, helping develop and expand what Joe has built over in East Dundee. As you know, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but 4 buildings have been constructed there on the property over the past 15 years. 250,000 square feet of building space, which is currently completely leased, 100%. He entered into 2 TIF agreements with the village, Route 25 and Christina Drive TIF, and have utilized those to help develop the road, the land, the infrastructure during the whole time there, and has expanded the TIF increments to over $1 million per year as of today. And he entered into the RDA and PUD agreements with the village to help build these buildings. The development has attracted popular retailers like Speedway, Cassidy Tire, Acme Truck Parts, Tarp Systems, and others, bringing additional sales tax revenue to the village. Joe's objective today and ours is to continue what he has started in the early 2000s, developing vacant land in East Dundee. PUD for Phase 2 is requesting the same departures that we were already granted in the PUD for the southern portion of the park. This will allow Joe to continue what he has started and what has been proven successful concepts for the village. Palumbo's current development plans for this PUD, the new one, includes construction of infrastructure, which is at least $3 million, including sewer, storm sewer, water, roadway. The storm sewer has already been completed, so the step 1 of that has been done. A new 47,000 square foot truck maintenance building on Lot 1 at a cost of approximately $8 million. A second 40,000 square foot truck maintenance building on Lot 2 at a cost of about $7.5 million. That's almost $19 million in new construction and development, with planned completion by the end of 2026. So, thank you for your consideration. Let us know if we can answer any questions.
Thank you. Does that conclude the speakers from the applicant?
Do you want to say?
Great.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have anyone in the audience who wishes to object to anything that was presented here today in this PUD? Okay. Seeing none, Franco, did we get any calls or emails?
One nearby property owner states he owns about 100 acres of farmland, just inquired why it wouldn't be a residential, but he wasn't too bothered by it, and he said he wouldn't come today, so he's just inquired.
Okay. Is that something that the applicant would want to respond to? If there's a local neighbor who is interested in why it's moving away from residential zoning?
And of course, most of it is already M1, except for just a little strip.
I'm sorry, if we're speaking, can I ask you to come back to the microphone, because we won't be able to hear this later in a recording.
And I believe, for some context with it, I believe in our comprehensive plan, this area was targeted as originally as a residential development.
I would have to look that up. I can't answer that right now.
Yeah, I believe that. Joe, is that in your report? That's correct. Yeah, so that's why I think it's in line with the objectives.
I'll quickly show you, since I have it in my hand. This is the village's existing zoning map. And what you're going to see is that the little triangle, the very northeast part of our land, is currently zoned B3.
Okay.
All the gray is M1, and a little, and this yellow going down the west side is R1. Do you want to see this?
No,
Okay, so I think the neighbor's just misinformed.
Yeah, it's, I'm glad we have it on record, it being a referenced in the report, it being a deviation from the original plan. We do have an old comprehensive plan, and I believe in the report, we stated that the area has developed since the comprehensive plan to more match what you guys are trying to do.
I don't think it typically be a residential.
Yeah, you can, but then you have to share the TIF revenue with the school board, but it's
Yep.
definitely not a residential area. You're right.
Okay, so at this point, Kelly, would it be appropriate for us to ask questions?
Absolutely. We haven't concluded the hearing yet, just to keep in mind. So anybody that's testifying must be sworn. So if you're asking questions of staff must be sworn.
Okay,
I think everybody on this side's been sworn, so just want to keep the formality.
yes,
Yeah.
sounds great.
Typically, you close a public hearing and then discuss it.
Yeah, I was just wondering now if we would be asking them questions. Because we want to ask the questions.
Yeah, if you want it as part of the record, then
Yeah.
I would say ask your questions and make it
Right.
part of the record, then you can deliberate on your.
Yeah. And I think it's more to make sure we get, in absence of anyone objecting, I just want to have some critical comments in the record. I think I would like some background as to why the staff made the recommendations that they did, through the points that were addressed by the applicant.
Yeah, I would defer to our building inspector, Chris Ranieri, who
Why don't-
worked with Erica.
Why don't we swear in Chris and, Chris Ranieri and Joe Hines, just in case?
Yes.
All right.
Sounds good.
Can you state your names, please?
Chris Ranieri, Joe Hines.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay, so I think the
Okay.
question was, I'm sorry.
Yes, I would like to go through, the applicant highlighted specific points as why they, let's say, disagree with your staff recommendations, and I'd like to understand the reason for these additional restrictions that the staff, made. So we could go through the items that the applicant went through, or we can just go through this table straight through.
Chair, I think it'd be easier if you just go through the table, row by row.
Yeah.
And if Chris or Joe wants to approach the podium when they speak, it'll be easier for the
Okay.
recording.
So the first one that was called out specifically was, here, my note again, is 5, which is rear yard setback, which the code is for 40 feet. 20 was allowed in the PUD 1. They asked for 20 and staff recommended 40.
So what we did is we reviewed the proposed plan on, building plan on lot 1, which would meet that 40-foot rear yard requirement if we're looking at the front of the building as Rock Road and the rear of the building as the ComEd easement to the east. So that building would meet that requirement. I'm assuming they're going to have similar buildings being built like that, so we assume that other buildings would also meet that requirement for the rear yard.
Okay. So you were just trying to...
If they were considering the rear yard to be the south property line, which would be off of Penny, south of Penny, then that would not meet the requirement. Actually, it still would, because we're talking building line, so there's still, the building line is where the building would be built.
So it sounds like the motivation here was it was looking like the property was going to fit, the building was going to fit, and it's
Correct.
better to not have I'm forgetting the term, the deviation, the departure, if we don't need to.
Correct.
Okay. And then I think for 6, I believe everyone is pleased. That's the one with the parapet wall. Do we feel in that we want to have equipment on the top of roofs blocked by screening?
In some instances, it would be required to have it look aesthetically correct. Depending on the height of the building, the distance you would get from it, and how far the equipment was off the edge of the roof. If the equipment's in the center, it'd be very difficult to see that equipment even with a lower parapet wall.
Okay. And do we have other buildings in the village that kind of have this like 30-foot, 5-foot tall with the 6-foot parapet on it?
I don't believe they're 6 foot.
Okay. Okay.
But we were going to grant them that if they needed it.
Okay. That, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I can speak.
Yeah.
Right. So it's 35 feet with an additional 6 foot, or is it 35
Yes.
feet including that 6 foot
It
parapet wall?
would be in addition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. We got a lot of things to go through.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You might
It's-
All
as-
right.
You might as well just say.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, mine's
yeah,
fine.
yeah. So the next one is, we're going into the parking setback requirements. So we have front yard parking setback, required is 40. PUD 1 had 10, they requested 10, and we asked for 40 again. This is line item 9.
Yeah, okay, so what we're considering there is that our code for the right-of-way is 80 feet, and we were reducing that to 66 feet. And we're
Okay.
agreeing to that, that's item number 35. So that would give them more frontage, make their lots larger, because the right-of-way would be smaller. Therefore, we thought that the 40-foot would be a good compromise between giving them the 66-foot right-of-way.
Okay. And that's both from an aesthetic and convenience perspective, or is it?
Yes,
Okay.
a little more green space.
Yep. Okay, then the next one is 10. So another parking setback with 40, 10, 10, and then this one we did 25 instead of 40.
Yeah, I think again, this is just mainly also to give a little more green space between buildings
Yes.
for the
Okay.
setbacks.
And then same with the side yard and the rear yard.
Correct.
So, okay. So yes, I mean, and it sounds like we're looking for green space as a trade-off for existing building space, clearly.
Correct.
Okay. And then now on to 22, front yard parking screening. No, I'm sorry, they're in agreement with 22.
Yeah, so the code requires 30 feet, which we feel is very, very close. Typically, the canopies are gonna get 30 foot per tree anyways.
Yeah.
They're requesting 100 foot. We thought a compromise would be 50 feet.
Okay, then let's move on to row, I jumped a little bit ahead there. You guys had I think we talked about this during the presentation, Franco. You brought up this comment regarding row 15 and the business signage. Is that just a clarification that we need in the application?
Yeah, and Peter mentioned that during his presentation, that he was requesting the business signage standards in addition to them.
And you guys are okay with that?
Staff is okay with that.
Yeah, okay. Then row 26. So that's now under the truck parking islands. So this 1 per 10 stalls, I guess you guys,
We agreed to John.
yeah. So that, I guess you guys, then the village engineer was supposed to talk, was supposed to, yeah.
So you're talking about row
26. The village engineer and the applicant have should obviously safely been done in other truck parking areas. So, Joe, if you could come up and explain how with 26 that this is legitimate to have no parking stalls for truck parking islands.
So I just brought this up basically because there's some gray area between how we treat an automobile parking lot,
Mhm.
and basically long-term, short-term trucking parking lot. So I just want to make sure when I'm reviewing these plans in the future that we've got clarification that we're not requiring or requiring parking islands for the truck parking areas. It seems reasonable not to have islands because it's just another obstacle for large vehicles to basically run over and move them. So
Yep.
Okay, great.
that's my thought.
Cool, thank you. And then for the 25, the parking islands, 1 per 22 is what they're asking for, and we have 1 per 18. If you could make a comment on that, Chris.
I think it was just some, basically just a compromise between the 40 that's, let's see, is that required, the 40? No.
Required 1 per 10.
Yeah,
So, and they asked for 1.
Yeah, well, right,
They had
okay.
1 for 40.
they had 1 through 40 in their first PUD. They're looking for 22. So we thought 18 was a compromise.
Okay. And then, 7, let's see. 29. So for front area landscaping, you're suggesting that we have front only for foundation area landscaping, and they're asking for none.
Correct. And I believe what we did on the retail building is we granted them a variance to do the landscape. So they have, their front of their building, they have like a 5 or 6 foot walkway in front of the building. And then in front of that, outside of that walkway is where they put the 5 foot of landscaping between the walkway and the parking lot. That was a compromise that we agreed to on that building. If they, on this building here, if it's similar to what they built before, there's one entryway on the corner of the building, which would be I would guess either the northwest corner of that building. So the rest of it would not have doors coming out of it along Rock Road. The length of the building is all overhead doors, so there's no way you can do landscaping there.
Right.
The back of the building, I believe, has a loading dock. That's why we're saying that there's room to do that 5 foot landscaping in the front of the building, and it's not a very large area to do it in.
Okay. And then on to 28. The island, I guess that one, no, that appears to be in agreement now.
Yep, 400 square feet.
So there's, okay. And that was the reduced number, okay.
And then we did 29 to the front one. The front only was a compromise, and then now into 30, the trash enclosures.
Yeah, and 30, 30 and 31. So with 30, we have this masonry wall, and they're asking for landscaping. I'm not familiar with any other, where do we have masonry wall trash enclosures?
It is in the code.
Okay.
It's required to have a masonry trash enclosure. The apartment buildings that were built on Main Street, both of those
Okay.
have it.
The DC Cobb's building.
Yeah, okay, back there.
Right.
But,
Pardon me?
okay.
The DC Cobb's
Yeah,
building.
DC
Black and
Cobb's
River.
has it.
Yeah, so that like 4
the newer
foot, yeah,
buildings
okay.
are all, I mean, it's been in the code for a while, but it's pretty consistent.
Okay, and it's for any commercial?
Yeah,
in any
and then
commercial
the
district?
retail center that Mr. Cuomo's building has one on it,
Okay,
so.
okay. And then 30, same with the storage facilities. It's the same, well,
Yeah,
solid wall
and
fence.
the storage facilities the code doesn't require masonry wall, but it does require a fence, a solid
Mhm.
fencing. And that was what was done on Althoff Cat building for their yard.
Yeah,
They did get a minor variance to that to use the chain link with the slats in it for the sides, the back, and then the front they did a solid, basically it looks like it's a vinyl product that looks like stone.
Okay.
Thus far, the buildings that Mr. Palumbo's put up haven't required that. This one would not require that, the one on lot number 1.
Okay.
But if there was a business that specifically, like Altal for Cat, had storage yard with equipment and materials, that would have to be fenced in.
Okay. So then onto these additional items that were provided today by the applicant, 36 through 40.
37.
Yeah, no, 37 through 40. I think 37 is pretty straightforward. I mean, that's, I think, in line with our understanding. The equation for calculating how many parking spaces to use, was this in there and just not brought up?
I didn't see it in the engineer's memo that we went off of that table. This table that I have in my memo is from the engineer's memo. I don't know, Joe, if you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Chris.
As Mr. Bezos said, that the M1 requirements is pretty silent on a specific parking count. It's on employees, which is kind of hard to determine at the time of planning a building like this. So basically what we do when we review is ask them for their theoretical employee count, and then it's usually below what's needed or what's provided for parking, and we go by that. So, I mean, it would be nice to have a square footage, but in the end, the request is if there are more employees, then you have to provide those parking. So I don't see why it needs to be acted upon.
No, it sounds reasonable to me based on the proposal as well. So the 39, and I think I would like a little clarification from the applicant on this one. It says, so the loading space will be 2. I know our ordinance has a dock requirement based on footage of the building.
I could also clarify that a parking stall could be used as a loading berth, so there's no variance required.
Okay, and then it says 2 per building, so we have...
No, it's based on square footage.
Right.
Loading berths are based on square footage.
Yeah, so I think in this 39, we'd have to make sure that was clarified, that the appropriate number based on the square footage.
Exactly.
As opposed to just flat.
Right.
Yeah. And it might be 2 for the one they're already building. The one that you actually have, that might be in that 2.
We have no problem
Yeah.
providing the requisite number.
Okay, fantastic. So it sounds to me that the village, a lot of these recommendations are to improve the green space, improve overall attractiveness. That's the motivation in general that I've heard for these requests. Is that, okay. So,
Mr. Chairman, maybe we should ask if the applicant has any questions for staff.
yes, do you guys have any questions for the staff at this point?
I'd just like to respond to some of the
Yes,
staff's
so please do.
clarifications. So as to table row number 2, the 40-foot, Chris said it's because our current building meets or exceeds that. This PUD ordinance is intended to apply to the entire 33 acres. Who knows what the next building is going to be? And frankly, when we come in for phase 3, we'd like to probably ask for just the very same thing, and that's why we kept saying over and over again, we think the standards that were applied and have been followed in phase 1 should be applied in phase 2. The fact that this first building more than meets the 40 feet, that's great. We're happy about that too, but I don't think that's a reason to make all the lots 40 feet. In number 9, and I hope I'm not having a brain fade on this. No, I'm sorry. The explanation from number 9 is why are we asking for a 10-foot building setback or a parking lot setback, but why is the staff recommending 40, and Chris, I believe, said, well, we gave them a narrower right-of-way, so they have more land for their lot. Well, that again is exactly what happened in Phase 1. That right-of-way down there is 66 feet. So again, we really like to see this just be consistent. This is Phase 2. In item 10, that there'll be more green space. You know, green space, who doesn't like green space, right? It's pretty. We're in an industrial park here. Frankly, it doesn't even lead into anyone else's industrial park. It's an insular industrial park, like Terra Business Park. So, you know, the more green space we have, the less buildable area we can do, the less tax revenues. We don't think it's in your interest to do it. We'd appreciate not doing it. Would you look at number 25? That's the number of parking stalls between islands. The village ordinance says, and I'm a real visual person, for every 10 parking stalls, you've got to block them on either side with an island. When the village approved Phase 1, they said, okay, for every 40 parking stalls, you've got to block them with an island. Well, we really like that. But here, and I don't know why, I wasn't the designer, here we're saying, okay, we're not going to ask for 40. We'll go back to 22, which is still, you know, it's better, it's more code-friendly at 22 than it was at 40. And so when the village says they want to compromise at 18, it's really not a compromise at all. We had 40. We were compromising at 22. I mean, if they wanted to compromise, and I don't mean to be contentious, they could have gone to 32. But you know, we're happy with 22, even though it's more restrictive on us than before. The foundation area landscaping, if you could, let me just ask Mr. Palmo something for a minute. Good. So on the item 29, we will agree with staff on that foundation landscaping on the front only. That's another agreed item. The trash enclosures, masonry wall. Again, if it was okay in '07, why isn't it okay now? Landscaping versus a masonry wall. Storage facilities, we don't have a problem with this, whether it's fencing or whatever. We understand that. I think I have one more sheet of paper. Here it is. No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would ask one more statement from the village, if there's any a rebuttal to the why we would want this different than the connected PUD, the PUD that's already there. You know, we were hearing a lot of arguments towards, you know, have it be cohesive, have it be consistent.
That was my question too.
Yeah.
I don't have anything further to add than what we stated.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any questions in regards to getting out information regarding this proposal?
Any ideas what would be in lot 3 or 4? Would that be more retail, or is that all more or less industrial?
But it's market driven. So it all depends if we get that connection, which I think is great. I think the village likes it. I think even the state likes something for a change. They might get into that main road. So I'm hoping on retail. I'm hoping on retail on 68.
But nothing in the pipe right now?
Oh, no, it's too
Yeah.
far away.
Okay.
But retail, well, they were putting up in 72 to 1,000 square feet. And we're about 70% occupied rate.
If I could follow up with Mr. Stecker's question. We haven't talked about this, but on this picture, where you see the lake here, this lake is not in the PUD at all. But Mr. Palumbo is somewhat continuing to finish the north edge of this lake, and to compact it so that at some point This frontage along Route 68 will be developable, and he would most likely look to do retail there too, if retail is alive and well then. But that would be consistent with what you just asked him over here.
Other questions? I think I have one more, and I know when I read through the packet I saw it, now I'm having a hard time finding it, and maybe the applicant can help me on this. I believe there was a statement in here about the undeveloped lots being usable as parking until they were developed. Am I correct in remembering reading that?
You are. The village has given us parking waivers by separate ordinance that apply to all of this land up here. And now we're doing a PUD. And I suppose, Mr. Plummer, you explain that. I mean, once you begin and you put in the street, et cetera, once IDOT approves on it, will you continue to park trucks on other parts of these lots that don't have buildings on them? In other words, once IDOT approves the street alignment, you won't put truck parking.
Not north, anyway.
Not north. So that really is
The
a.
village will. They're 3.5 acres per hour.
So that comment can be stricken.
Okay. Yeah, so, okay, good. Yeah, I mean, I believe what I had read was it was going to be allowed, and, I would have just wanted some type of review period on it, so that the goal is to have this develop into buildings. Okay, we have an opportunity now for a closing statement if you would like to make one. I think you did, in a way, informally a few minutes ago, but if you'd like to make a formal one, you have that opportunity right now.
Thank you. I'm not going to take any more of your time. We certainly hope you'll recommend approval for the continuation of Phase 1 into what would now be Phase 2 and eventually Phase 3. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
You all had some great questions. Your question was the best. Why change it now? It's good.
Yeah.
It's in the same tip.
So,
But Chris and Joe do a great job. They're doing their job.
Most definitely.
Do truck cart drivers care about green space? I'm not going to swear here.
okay. So, I believe, do we have anyone else in the audience who aren't objectors or applicants who would like to make a comment? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close it.
We have a motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion and a second?
Stomach,
Yes?
Runner,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Feck,
Yes.
Kruger.
Okay, so now we get to talk about this. So I think the big things we need to kind of go over are our take on staff's recommendations versus what the applicant, asked for. And I think in general, I'd be interested to hear anything that you guys have to say, given what we've just learned.
Sure.
about this.
Well, I think it's kind of hard to determine, like a setback, if we don't know what's going along Route 68. If it's retail, you probably want a little bit of space between edge of pavement, and you don't want everything right up to the limit. So it's kind of hard to say. It kind of depends on what would be going in on lot 3 and 4.
Yeah, and I think, from my perspective, that's a big part of this development, and what I think might make it different from some of the, the previous PUD is targeting retail here and this road that could eventually hook up to 72 and would have people driving through here. If that did happen, this would be a cut that people would use instead of 25 in certain situations. And, now it isn't like the other roads in the PUD, which are literally just access roads to the, the industrial areas back there. It is a road that residents will be driving down. I think that's like the sidewalk makes sense on that road because of that. It could be a way people will cut through that area. So yeah, I think there's definitely some consideration to be made in regards to the retail places and, if it's retail and if there's people going through that specific area.
Is it cell tower going to remain where it's at? just, that's on lot 4. Yeah.
When Mr. Palumbo bought that, he bought it from, was it Prairie Materials? They had granted a cell tower easement, and then, as so often occurs, this cell tower, some cell tower company comes along and buys an easement, and now you're stuck with it for just as long as they want to use it, so we can't get rid of it if we want to.
And
There's
so
no
that-
lease- There's no lease to expire.
Oh,
It's an
okay.
easement.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that corner there, you really can't put anything on there other than the tower, right? On lot 4.
And I suppose unless you could find a building that's tall enough, you could put them on the roof of the building. but-
Sorry, if you don't mind speaking to the mic for the recording later on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I suppose if we had a tall enough retail building, we could convince them to put their tower on top of the building
Yeah.
at our expense.
Relocated, yeah.
Other comments in general about the way of looking at the proposal and staff's recommendation?
There you go.
Very nice. Adapt and overcome.
Well, we're gonna go
Yeah.
through every one, aren't we?
Yeah, so is that how we're gonna,
Are
we're
we
gonna?
gonna do that?
we're gonna-
So we can definitely go through each one and decide if we want to respond.
Mhm.
We can make a more general statement and, approve or deny the whole thing with staff's recommendations, without staff's recommendations. It's really up to you. If you want to go through and pick each one, we can do that. Or we
Yeah.
can,
And yeah, I understand where the staff's coming from, that's their job,
Yeah.
We're looking down, just for the better of the good, we're looking down the road. We want to have opportunity to have different types of businesses coming
Mhm.
here, and like you said, this is going to be a thoroughfare, hopefully. So we want to have aesthetically pleasing
Right.
on both ways that you're looking.
Yeah, and it is important to remember, right, we're going to recommend or not recommend this for approval to the board. They're the ones who get to make
The
the
final
final
decision.
decision. They can change it, right?
Right.
So it's one of the reasons why it's important for us to say everything that we're considering in this meeting. It's something that they can watch our recordings and see what we talked about and thought about.
Sure.
So, I think having some things in there that, we really want there to be a discussion at the board level is, I think, makes total sense.
Definitely.
So, like I said, so we could go through if that's what the rest of the commissioners want to do. Or if there's
I would say
specific
we
ones.
could go through it, but when we really don't know what businesses are going to be present on lot 3 and 4, it's kind of a guess as to what is appropriate.
Yeah, so-
if there's a way that we can incrementally approve as we know what's going on there, maybe pass something according to staff recommendation to be reviewed at a later date, depending on the tenant and the building in the future. If there's some way that could be.
Right, which would be closer to our standard variance process.
I think if I may, there are some standards to look at in the code, and I think this commission can certainly make some findings based on those standards, which are more general in aspect today. I think when you prepare findings of fact, you want to look generally at what the standards are in the code, but you also want to note any concerns that this board would have for the board to approve or not approve. So you may want to look at it that way. The conditions for approval and, does this meet the design regulations according to the code?
Mhm. So how would you guys like to proceed?
Well, we're either going to vote with staff's recommendations, or we're going to go through it item by item.
Yep.
And either approve
Yes.
it, right?
Yes, and if we did, I guess I would like clarification. If we did, let's say, approve on staff, the staff recommendations, it being in a PUD doesn't prevent it from them doing a variance request down the line if a building needs to go around it. This is just like resetting the default rules for the whole area.
Yeah, PUDs they're hybrid in nature. I'm sure Mr. Bezos will agree. Often you see special use requests and variances along with the PUD request because they're talking about so many acres. So the idea is let's wrap it up in one fell swoop as opposed to having to come back in piecemeal. But certainly if this body were not to approve certain of the variations, they could come back and make a request at a later date.
Right.
Or
See-
the deviations.
That would be
Yeah,
more
yeah.
appropriate, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, right, and so, I mean, really, we're setting the ground rules for this, you know, anything we approve tonight,
Mhm.
they can just do, you
Right,
know,
right.
and it won't come back for any, you know,
Right.
any review.
Yeah, I would feel comfortable with the staff recommendations on that, and then if something needs to be tweaked in the future, they can,
Amend the PUD.
yeah.
Yeah,
amend
if
the PUD.
a
Because
specific.
we
building-
really don't have all the information as to
Right.
what we're looking at, you know,
Yeah,
as to what's coming in the future.
so and then
That
that,
would be a good way to do that.
Did we have that with the first variant? I mean, the first time we didn't have that information the first one they set up. 2007, did we?
no, we don't know, none of us were here.
Okay, so, sounds like they had guidelines at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, that property, you could say, was in a different situation back then. It was, I believe, a totally, you know, open piece of land, you know. Now, because of their great development, it's a growing area, and there's a lot more people wanting to obviously lease these properties. So, you know, I think we can be a little more, theoretically, we could be a little more selective now. But, yeah. You know, now that we see what it is, you know, we
Right.
had no idea what it was going to be.
Yeah, it's a growing business park.
Yeah, and it could have gone a totally different way than it did, right? But this is the way it went. And I think staff's suggestions are thinking, if this is the baseline, it will continue kind of feeling like it does.
Working from that baseline they gave you
Yeah.
in 2007.
No, the new
new one.
baseline. So it's
The new
actually,
one,
it's
okay.
looking, and it'd be interesting, I doubt if staff did any of this, if they looked at the buildings that were put in and how much they really leveraged the previous PUD deviations, or if a lot of the buildings were meeting our standard ones like this. Lot 1 building already will meet by the setback requirements, you know. You probably didn't do it, but I think we've seen pictures. They've built nice things, and they're
Right.
not building right to the edge of the limits all the time. You know, that's
Right.
not the goal. The goal, I think, would be to just not have to worry about it so much when you're developing your building. You know,
Right.
you can fit it, and if it needs to be tweaked a little bit, you've got some room to play.
Yes, I agree.
As opposed to just, you know, maximizing every square inch that you could by, you know, the letter of the law.
Right.
Do you want to read the findings of fact out loud?
Yeah.
To make sure you guys understand.
Yes, so that's a great way to do this, so we can approve the findings of fact, and we should do that before we do, you know, make any other approvals. So, and I'm the only one who has this.
And as an option, I'm not saying doing this, but as an option, this is a lot. If you want, you could always ask to come back for a special meeting. It doesn't have to be in August, it could be any day in August. As long as there's enough notice for the publication, which is 15 days, for you guys to digest it, come back if you want. You don't have
Okay.
to make something today if you want. Just keep that in your pocket.
Okay.
And just because, I just want to understand it completely. The Penny Road, that's just probable. We want that. That's not a for sure thing. We're not.
That is probably highly likely.
DOT needs to approve it.
Yeah, they haven't approved the.
Joe, if you could speak at the mic, please.
Sorry, Joe.
We haven't heard from IDOT whether or not the geometry has been approved, but in all likelihood, it's gonna be pretty close to what you see.
Okay.
It's just, we don't wanna finalize things before we get there.
Okay, yeah, and if we didn't, that road would just vary. It would just, I mean, what would we do if it didn't get approved? What's the,
I think IDOT and the developer both wanna get rid of that.
yeah,
That dangerous intersection.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So it's just a matter
That's
of
dangerous.
how the geometry of the connection works.
Okay,
But that intersection will drop.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the findings of fact, I will read these all aloud, and I do have some comments from staff that I'll add in before we have our discussion. So the first, does the proposed PUD meet the conditions for approval under section 157249 of the East Dundee Municipal Zoning Code? And the conditions for approval are, in what respect does the design of the PUD meet the requirements and design standards of the development standards and design criteria in 157250? And it says it matches, the staff recommendation is the proposed use matches the code requirements under this 157250 condition on the approved proposed variations. So I assume that means with what you guys put in your staff recommendations, you feel it meets the respect of the design standards. And that's really just making sure it fits cohesively in our village.
In the area.
In the area, okay. So, is there any objection on that? You feel that this is in line in general with the area? Okay. Once we get through these things, I'll ask the question again in general for us to say yes or no on this specific item. So B, the extent of which the proposed plan deviates and or requires waivers for bulk regulations in the zoning ordinance, and how the modifications design standards from subdivision control regulations fulfill the intent of those regulations. And it's the deviations, I think, in this case, well, staff says the proposed PUD matches the existing surrounding of the nearby 2007 PUD, so the deviations are in line with those deviations. I think that also makes sense. C, the extent of the public benefit produced by the PUD, such as but not limited to the adequacy of common open spaces and or public recreational facilities provided, sufficient control over vehicular traffic, provision of public services, provision and protection of the reasonable enjoyment of land. So this one, I think, really, when you look at us trying to put in additional green space, increasing right-of-ways, it's definitely coming to this. It's not a residential district. This is from the staff. However, vehicle traffic would be improved due to the improved traffic intersection. So that would be referring specifically to the Rock Road extension. So I believe with the staff recommendations, they're definitely considering the green space. D, the relationship and compatibility beneficial or adverse of the PUD to the adjacent properties and nearby land uses. Staff says the proposed PUD matches the existing surrounding of the nearby 2007 PUD. I agree with that as well. Yeah, okay. The extent to which the PUD fulfills the objectives of the future planning objectives or other planning policies of the village. It matches the current use of the area. I think it's, out of line of our comprehensive plan, which just further points of us having to review our comprehensive plan. Agree, or any comments on that one? No. Okay. The PZHC finds that the PUD satisfactorily meets the standards for special use as defined in 157224. So I believe this section is actually now, if this was a variance request, would we just grant the variance, right?
Well, this is special use. So,
special use.
so you'll note, and what you're looking at are the factors considered in a special use, which goes into this factor for the approval of the PUD.
Okay.
And it looks like staff's recommendation is that it does meet the standards for special use.
Yes, so that is,
So the first part of this analysis is, going back to the larger question, does the proposed PUD meet the conditions for approval under section 157249 of the East Dundee Municipal Zoning Code, and the conditions that we just read aloud, 1A through F, go to that answer?
yes. So those, you guys all have this section, so you can read it. So this would be, they're, once again, all in line with the general consistent use of the area. And they've considered traffic and all of that.
Roadway improvements.
Yes, the roadway improvements. Okay?
So it appears the answer might be yes.
Yes, for
Yes.
F.
Okay.
Yes, for
Yes.
F, it's
Okay.
yes. But F itself is just a subsection of this overall A, right?
Right.
So the answer to that is yes. So I think we answered yes for every single part of A. So going back to it, would we say, does the proposed PUD meet the conditions for approval under section 157249 of East Dundee Municipal Zoning Code? I believe our answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay. We don't need motions for every one of these, right?
No, let's get everything in, and then we'll adopt the findings of fact as
Okay,
you complete
perfect.
all your findings.
So development standards, design criteria. Does the PUD meet the standards and criteria set forth in section 157250 of the East Dundee Municipal Code? Yes or no? So we have to consider the density. Does the density, minimum lot side, and minimum setback dimensions for each use proposed within a PUD shall be determined by the conventional zoning classification, which would permit the proposed use unless a variance is specifically requested as part of that special use? No, the side yard, the staff's recommendation is no, or comment is no. The side yards fronting the street side is rear yards proposed to be varied from the M1 zoning district requirements. So this is because they're asking for that specific variance. So, okay. PUDs, so do you guys, I mean, they are asking for those variances. So I think for these, we should just be, if they ask for the variances or the,
So I think what you can do is the commission should maybe answer the overall question, does this meet the development standard and design criteria, looking at these factors, then maybe go back and determine with a finding of fact which findings that this commission recommends to move forward for deviations and which it does not.
so you're suggesting we don't go through these individually and we just say right now whether we believe it meets the design criteria?
It's up to you. You can go through them each individually, or you can wait to the end.
So, so in general, I guess, do we believe that it meets the design criteria and standards and criteria set forth in 157250 of the Municipal Zoning Code? Or would you like to go through them individually first? Okay, I think I'd like to go through them individually first. So we
5-minute break.
I think we're getting close. So in terms of density, and I'll just do summaries here. So in density, it's a little, they're asking for variances or deviations to add increased density over our standard approach. I think we all can agree that that's the case. So so being compromised of single type of land use or mixture of land uses when applicable and when different intensity of land uses are appropriately buffered or separated. So we believe, the staff believes that we are in line with this. The proposed use may use single type or mixed use as controlled by the proposed subdivision. So I don't have any disagreement in that. Does everyone have any? Okay. The uses proposed shall be consistent with those listed in allowable uses in their respective zoning districts. They've asked for more districts, so the staff is saying that this is a no because they want a variance there. The use listed as special uses in the zoning district in which the development is located may be allowed. Yes. I disagree with that. The PZHC may recommend that the village board may approve access to a dwelling by a driveway or pedestrian walk easement as is not applicable, so we can ignore that one. The PZHC may also recommend the village board may approve yards of lesser widths or depths that required for permitted uses in the zoning classification which the plan development is including, provided that there's protected covenants, those covenants are recorded with perpetual access easements. Once again, that's not a. The spacing between buildings shall be consistent with the application of recognized site planning. Can you speak a little bit on that one, Franco?
Joe could speak on that one.
Joe, can you come up to the microphone? So this is that the spacing between buildings shall be consistent with the application of recognized site planning principles for securing unified development, and that due consideration is given to the openness normally afforded by intervening streets and alleys. And it says yes by designated subdivision developments.
Right, so we're thinking when this area gets platted with a subdivision, that those lots will govern how the buildings can be laid out, so.
Okay.
That's our thought.
Makes sense. And then the yards for principal buildings along the periphery of the development shall not be less width or depth than required for permitted uses in the districts in which the planned unit development is included. The plan is developed to afford adequate protection to neighboring properties, i.e. fire protection sufficient area needed for utility easements, is recommended by the PZHC and approved by the village board. So, okay. So it's really no, but that the setbacks are primarily impacting their own property and this ComEd right of way, so it's not a major impact. That's the.
It's not applicable because the neighboring properties are the one owner.
Yeah, and ComEd right of way. So, Okay. So, oh, okay.
No, you don't have to step on my account.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I will allow for a recess until Connie Kruger gets back, if anybody else needs to get up, stretch a little bit. We're almost done now. So now, even though I guess I will ask you here, Kelly, since we did some no's and some yeses on these things, but now we just still can look at that holistically as how we answered the findings of fact.
Yeah, and again, you can, it's not, these are just the findings. You could say, we find that this generally meets the criteria, we have some concerns about X, Y, or Z, or we would like to see one, two, or three change. These are just recommendations.
Yeah. We did wait for you. So I think I'm okay with this one being, a yes with the, the understanding.
B? You talking about B?
Yes, B. With the understanding being that we do have variations from the standard, but in general, it's something that we believe is in line with what we would want to see there.
Any,
I'd agree with you.
Okay. Any objections to that?
No.
Okay. So we have a yes for B. And then now for C, do the variations requested in the PUD meet the standards to be applied for variations pursuant to section 157207 of the code? I think this one, so this is, I got mixed up, I got excited. I thought I had, with the special use, I thought I got to this part. So this one, we've done enough variance hearings. I don't think that it meets the requirements of a variance because these aren't hardships. It wasn't presented as such. I think the goal here is, to help them develop the property better to make more money. That's, and we know when doing variances, that's not a reason to do a variance, but I don't think that's a disqualification on this at all. I think that's where we all know what we're doing here.
Can I ask a question? So the standard, we're not applying standards for variations, are we? There's no hardship determination.
No, we threw it in for them to review and consider,
Yeah.
but it,
Yeah, it's in here so that we know, and I think it will be for the board when they see it, because they get variance requests from us, or applications from us, recommendations for approval, and then we'll be saying, yes, this one, it's different standards. You don't need to treat this like a variance. If it was a variance, it probably wouldn't get accepted, but it isn't a variance, So you
and
can
I'll just say, again, with PUDs, you've hit it right on the head. You don't take these hard line approaches with the standards. The idea is to look at the picture as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say this one is a no, but
No, but it doesn't really matter.
doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter.
It's, Okay, so so we have then for the three questions, right? There's only the three questions.
Right.
A, B, and C?
So would there be additional findings? I guess the question would be that this body would want to consider. So I guess the real question is, it sounds like this meets the standards, but what's the this? Is it the staff recommendations, or is
Right.
it the counter proposal to the staff recommendations? What is it that this body would be finding?
Yes, so we can improve the findings of fact before we make that recommendation, or do we need to put that in the findings of fact?
I think it should go in
specifically?
the findings of fact.
Okay. So I'll just throw out a proposal in that I am okay going with the staff recommendations, given all the conversation that we've had today, and then deal with resolving any, let's say, complications at the board level.
Yeah.
Or suggest, doing variances once we know more about the property, the buildings that are actually being put on. So,
I think that's the way to go.
so if there isn't anything in there, if somebody has a different approach, like if you want to do just what they asked for, or if you want to strike anything in particular that you have an objection against, feel free to make that suggestion.
No, I think what I had mentioned earlier and what you just mentioned, that's
Okay.
That's it.
go with that.
So is there, from staff, based on anything that we learned today, I don't think there is, that you have to go and review anything, from these additional items that were brought up? Or are you set with your recommendations as written in the packet?
With two clarifications to the freestanding signs to follow Village Ordinance 06-46, row number 16. I just want to double check that one more time before it goes to the village board for their recommendation. I know it'll be part of their summary.
Okay.
And then, did we touch on row 27, the parking island adjacent to truck parking? Can you refresh my memory? Was that Joe Hines? Did you speak on that one? And Erica just wanted to know how this was done successfully elsewhere. And I believe I mentioned that to Peter as well. I
Yeah.
talked to him on the phone.
Recommendation.
I think I don't know if he combined this with the other one, but yes.
So this is a little bit different than a truck parking island that's going to be next to, between two trucks. This is an area where the automobile parking area transitions to truck parking. And they're requesting that they not separate that and just stripe it out differently.
Just strike it.
Could you clarify, we're
Yeah.
recommending that there's a strike area, right?
Yeah, could you-
Parking area,
Just
just strike that.
Right, no island separating
Right.
the automobile parking adjacent to truck parking.
It is
Okay.
represented in
Could
your
you
packet.
please-
Sorry.
Yeah, I know.
It is represented in your packet with our 250 Patricia Lane building, where we do have automotive parking next door to truck parking, and it is a striped area in between the two designated as separation from the aerial view. It's the one that has the weird shaped parking lot.
Yeah.
But these
Interior.
cornered automobile areas have striped ground in between their automotive areas and the truck parking area.
Okay.
Okay, so with that proposal suggesting the village staff recommendation as entered, along with the signage as stated that you made.
Right.
But we don't have, should we record that on the findings of fact somehow? There isn't really a spot to put that, or we just have it in the record now that that's what we're gonna be deciding.
So for clarification, you're still need to look into,
That ordinance that was called out.
what's the concern?
It's a lengthy ordinance, and it's from 2006. And I want to make sure that there weren't any amendments to it or any changes, that it's still applicable, and have Chris's review on it for electronic signage.
So what we could do is adopt the findings of fact, subject to there being no amendments to ordinance 06-46.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Dash 46, what was the code again?
06 is just an ordinance.
Just an ordinance that.
Okay.
So I think if there was a motion, it should look maybe something like this, if I may recommend.
Okay.
A motion to adopt findings of fact that include a positive recommendation that this PUD passes the standards as set forth in the code, and as suggested to be adopted by staff's recommendations.
That'll be hard for me to remember to say.
If you have another way of saying it, so
Yes.
essentially, it meets the standards pursuant to the code, and this body is recommending
Okay.
it move forward with staff's recommendations.
Okay. So do we need to say the specific answers to all the questions?
I think you answered those already.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so let the record show that it's answered yes for A, yes for B, and no for C. And should I have a motion for approving the findings of facts pursuant to the review of ordinance 06-46 in this, with the recommendation to the board of taking the staff recommendations?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay?
Stenick,
Yes.
Brunner,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Beck,
Yes.
Kruger.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thanks for all your time.
Yes, thank you.
Nice meeting
Look
you.
forward to seeing you soon.
welcome.
Maybe not too soon, but seeing you again.
Well, that was easy.
Now,
Yeah, I mean, if we were gonna piecemeal all of them.
Yeah, but this would should have been fine.
I mean,
It's a
it's,
difference between 22 stalls and 18.
Probably the first meeting in August, Jeff. Probably the first meeting in August.
There's a meeting in August.
I think it's the 7th. Let me check.
I think you're
Yeah, let me double check.
August.
Sarah doesn't miss it.
What's that?
Yeah, we got more things. Sure. Yeah, and we have another agenda.
Let me touch base with you on that later on.
No, we have another agenda item. Okay, so
Okay.
resolving the new business, all of our items in our new business, our other business item
Yeah,
is considering a 90-day review and assessment regarding the compliance with the conditions required by the special use permit ordinance number 23-16 for the Willow and Birch Wellness Boutique located in 324 North River Street. So this was a review of the approval to allow cosmetic tattooing.
Right, right.
90 days from when we
Approved it?
when we approved it. So
So. what
I'm
do you-
just looking for a head nod that it's okay, with everything's going smoothly with the PZHC, and you do or do not desire to further investigate their operations.
Are we able to just discuss out in the open?
You could just say head nod, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I say yes.
Yeah.
I think they're doing.
You're
They're
Yeah.
doing great. I know the girls. I see them
Yeah,
all the
There's been
time.
no complaints.
no,
There's no
I've heard
problems.
of no complaints, no issues. I think no one even would notice that
They
they've
won't,
done
they don't
anything.
even know they do that there unless they go in and talk to
So
them.
I think it's a non-issue.
Yes, I agree.
Kelly, would that be a motion for staff not to pursue the 90-day condition on ordinance dash 23-16?
What was the provision in the ordinance?
The applicant of the special use permit on the property is subject to review and assessment to recall a hearing by the PZHC after 90 days commencing at the time of the adoption of this ordinance, if the PZHC desires to do so.
They don't desire to do it, so I don't think we need to do anything.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we just let it expire.
Agreed.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
let it expire.
And,
Okay.
Good with me.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for reminding us then.
Yeah.
So with that, we have no other business.
I do have one other thing. I'm just looking for a show of hands of who would be available for Thursday, August 10th, to have a special PZHC meeting, potentially to discuss a
What's going on August?
certificate of appropriateness for a downtown business looking to apply to the historic commission.
Yes. So would we cancel then the first one?
No,
Because
because
I can't
we-
make the first one.
Okay. Yeah, we would cancel first. And then switch it to the,
To the 10th. So it'd be moving the.
August 3rd to.
August 3rd would be canceled
To 10th.
to a special meeting on Thursday, August 10th.
I can't be here. I got something I have to do.
I can be here.
Okay, so
I'll
1,
be
2,
here.
3.
I'm traveling. I can't be here.
Okay, so 3. So I'll take a poll via
With Lily in
email
front, yeah.
with the other 2 members that aren't here.
Okay.
And if that date doesn't work, we'll shoot out a couple dates,
Sure.
Okay.
and then we'll post it online and do all the
Perfect.
notifications.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Franco.
Yep.
So then, with nothing else, right? Okay. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
A motion to
I'll second
adjourn.
that.
Okay?
Hold on, not that fast. This is always the fastest motion.
Yeah.
Should we discuss?
I jump on it.
Discuss things a little more.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I see, yeah, so happy.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, picture?
Right here.
Is he right in front?
Yeah, it is.
So, yeah.